met with President Zelensky of Ukraine. It was a very candid, open, forward-looking discussion where we were able to talk about the importance of continuing to stand behind the Ukrainian people and aggressively pushing back against this war of aggression that has been launched by Vladimir Putin and Russia. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia is important in terms of standing behind the Ukrainian people as it relates to the territorial dynamics that are at issue. But of course, the war of aggression launched by Russia involves other dynamics that are more important. Our values are at stake. And our values are the values of the Ukrainian people. The values of the Ukrainian people are shared by the American people. We had an opportunity to express our appreciation for the resilience, the strength, the heart, the soul that the Ukrainian people have exhibited, and of course their courage and their bravery on the battlefield and amongst the civilian population. This is a struggle between Ukraine and Russia, but it's also a struggle on the global stage between democracy and autocracy, between freedom and tyranny, between truth and propaganda, between good and evil. And it's important for us to stand behind Ukraine until victory is won. And I'm confident that that is certainly what House Democrats will continue to do. In that regard, in terms of us moving forward to meet the needs of the American people, both here and abroad, it's going to be incredibly important that we avoid a catastrophic, unnecessary Republican shutdown of government. There is a clear path to avoiding a shutdown. It involves, of course, bipartisanship here in the House as well as in the Senate. Democrats coming together with Republicans to pass a continuing resolution at the fiscal year 2023 levels to make sure there are no right-wing, partisan, ideological riders that have no place in an appropriations bill, let alone a continuing resolution to avoid a shutdown, and to meet the needs of the American people, both in terms of those Americans across the country in places like Hawaii or Florida, California, Vermont, or in other states that have been hit hard by extreme weather events and need relief, as well as to meet the needs of the American people in terms of our national security by continuing to stand behind Ukraine. That's the path forward. And the interesting thing is that House Democrats are aligned with Senate Democrats, and we're both aligned with Senate Republicans, and all of us, with the exception of the extreme MAGA Republicans, are aligned with President Joe Biden and the administration in terms of keeping the government open so we can meet the needs of the American people. But we need the extreme MAGA Republicans to get their act together in the civil war that's happening on the Republican side of the aisle, that's paralyzing Congress. Get your act together so we can handle the business of the American people and solve problems on their behalf. Questions?
I know you walked into the meeting with President Zelensky together. I know Speaker McCarthy was opening the floor upstairs here, but did you perceive any code in there with the Speaker not going into the meeting with him? Obviously, there's members of his conference who are opposed to funding Ukraine, and as you say, most of your people are in alignment.
I did not.
Is there some signal from him?
I don't believe so, but you'll have to ask the speaker that.
Would you have rather have
Question.
walked in with you?
No, speaker had indicated that he was opening the floor, and I take him at his word.
In the meeting, was there a different posture from the speaker than what we see publicly? He seems reluctant and questioning the support of Ukraine, in part because of the pressure that he's getting from some of his members. Did he express support for President Zelensky that we're not necessarily seeing him provide publicly?
I think that's the question that you have to ask the speaker. You know, it's not my place to comment on anything that any Republican member of the House had to say to President Zelensky. They can characterize it themselves.
You just saw the defense probes rule fail for the second time this week on the floor. What's your reaction to that chaos?
House Republicans continue to be in the midst of a civil war. It's a civil war that is hurting the ability of the Congress to do the business of the American people and to solve problems on behalf of everyday Americans. And what's happening is that House Republicans continue to be held captive by the most extreme elements of their conference, and it's hurting the American people. And this is a serious matter. We are less than 8 days away from the government shutting down. Why are we in this position? It's because Republicans have chosen to walk away from a bipartisan agreement that they themselves negotiated. And more than 300 members of the United States House of Representatives supported, with a strong bipartisan majority in the Senate, signed into law by President Biden. Why are the American people facing down another manufactured GOP crisis? They need to end their civil war because it's hurting the American people. I'm not saying they all have to like each other, but we should be able to figure out a way to get the business of the American people done. A reckless Republican shutdown will hurt seniors. It'll hurt children. It'll hurt families. It'll hurt veterans. It'll hurt public education. It'll hurt public safety. It'll hurt military readiness. It will hurt morale of the federal government employees who are essential in helping to keep America moving forward in the right direction. Why are we even in this situation? It's because the extreme MAGA Republicans are determined to jam their radical right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people. We've seen this done before. Republicans shut down the government partially twice in the 1990s. Why? Because they wanted to end Medicaid as we know it. Bill Clinton and Democrats to the rescue to stop that from happening. Same group of people, different version in 2013, shut the government down for 14 days. Why? Again, jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people. In that instance, they wanted President Obama to repeal his signature legislative accomplishment, the Affordable Care Act, and throw 20 million people or so off the rolls and deprive them of health care, like we were going to agree to that ransom note. Once again, Democrats to the rescue. 2018 into 19, same thing. They shut the government down for 35 days. By the way, when the government shutdown began, Donald Trump was president. Republicans controlled the House and the Senate. In December of 2018, they shut themselves down. That's how much it's in their DNA. That time, what was the extreme ransom note? We want you to waste billions of dollars of taxpayer money to fund Trump's ineffective medieval border wall. Once again, we held firm, refused to pay their ransom note. and we were able to get the government reopened. Why are we going down this road again? We know how it's going to end. We're not paying a ransom note so you can jam your extreme ideology down the throats of the American people and hurt everyday Americans. We never have, and we never will. Go back to this side, sorry. Second row.
If Congressman Matt Gaetz brings a motion to vacate to the floor, as he suggested that he might, would Democrats consider joining with Republicans to protect Speaker McCarthy's speakership?
We haven't given it a thought one way or the other because we're just focused right now on solving problems for the American people who have a whole host of challenges. We need to make America more affordable. We need to continue the progress that President Biden has enabled in building a healthy economy from the middle out and the bottom up. We need to continue to create better paying jobs for everyday Americans. There's a whole lot of things that we're trying to continue to work out. And so we're going to leave the gamesmanship and the brinksmanship to the other side of the aisle. When we as Democrats say we believe in putting people over politics, we actually mean it. And the American people are tired of the political gamesmanship, and that's all they see. So the notion that we should spend, one scintilla of time thinking about dealing with the chaos on the other side of the aisle should not be our focus when we're trying to resolve problems for the American people.
What are your thoughts on Speaker McCarthy's decision to essentially deny Zelensky's request for a joint address to Congress? Is that appropriate in your view?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it one way or the other and haven't gotten into the specifics. I thought it was important that President Zelensky was able to come to the Hill this morning and have, a candid, unrushed, comprehensive discussion about where we are in terms of the current war effort and where we need to go to ensure that Ukraine is victorious. Go back to the other side, Kevin.
We saw overnight the TPS designation expanded for Venezuelans. What do you see as the next step, if any, when it comes to dealing with the migrant situation in New York that the administration could take? And why, in your view, did it take so long to get to this point?
Well, the administration should be commended for taking this important step and for making sure that they dotted every I and crossed every T in terms of addressing the issue. Now, in my view, what's most important is that we can successfully implement the opportunity for individuals to temporarily work while their asylum applications are being processed, because that will benefit the American taxpayer. And the American taxpayer actually supports the notion that if individuals are here legally while they wait for their asylum applications to be processed, which is the case in New York City and in other parts of the country, they should be given the opportunity to work so they can provide for themselves and their families and relieve some of the strain that might otherwise exist in terms of the taxpayer. So President Biden and the administration has now taken this step, which is a very positive step forward, but we're going to have to make sure that the implementation in New York City proceeds in a thorough fashion, and that's been my message to both Governor Hochul and Mayor Adams, to make it clear that as a congressional delegation, we're all in to help the city move forward.
Chair Jayapal, speaking on the migrant crisis this week, she laid blame at the feet of Republicans. She said because they're talking about it so much, it kind of gives incentives for people to come over. I wonder, do you share these sentiments, and do you think it has any veracity? And as a follow-up, are you satisfied with the Biden administration's handling of immigration so far?
I think the Biden administration is doing all that it can in that they inherited a broken system that needs to be fixed moving forward in a bipartisan way through comprehensive immigration reform and leaning in to strengthening the border in a manner consistent with our values, both as a nation of immigrants and as a nation anchored in the rule of law. Chair Jayapal is correct in the observation that while Republicans talk a lot about the challenges at the border, they've demonstrated no willingness to do anything from a public policy standpoint to relieve the challenges at the border. Exhibit A, the continuing resolution that Republicans presented this week would have cut the Department of Homeland Security by 8%. Are you kidding me? The same group that's lecturing us about inaction at the border actually wants to severely damage, through an 8% cut, the ability of the Department of Homeland Security to manage the border? That tells you all you need to know.
Thank you, sir. On the CR, there was a CR a couple days ago on the Republican side. Now that there's another one with more cuts, Democrats don't support it. It's dead on arrival at the Senate. I'm wondering, do you feel as though they're wasting time? And what are the tangible steps of moving forward from this and actually like avoiding a shutdown or actually funding the government?
You know, House Democrats have said from the very beginning that we want to find common ground with the other side of the aisle whenever and wherever possible. And we're ready, willing, and able to continue to do that. Rosa DeLauro, who's the lead Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, has made it clear from the very beginning that she's willing to sit down in a room, anytime, any place, to have a discussion with her colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle, along with our partners in the Senate, to be able to move the appropriations process forward. There is a clear pathway, and we've indicated this publicly and privately. One, pass a continuing resolution at fiscal year 2023 levels. Two, get rid of all the extreme, partisan, right-wing, ideological writers that the American people do not support. And three, make sure we provide for the needs of the American people by addressing things like support for states that have been adversely impacted by extreme weather events and addressing our national security concerns in the context of the Ukrainian war effort. And if we were to do those things, we would create the condition where the Appropriations Committee members, led by Rosa on our side, can continue to have a four corners discussion about arriving at a spending agreement at the end of the year that meets the needs of the American people. This is not complicated, particularly when a bipartisan agreement was reached in May that the extreme MAGA Republicans themselves negotiated and that a majority of them voted for on the floor of the House of Representatives. Why are we here?
So you feel that they're wasting time with bills that are not going to pass?
It's a Latin phrase, res ipsa loquitur. It speaks for itself.
If McCarthy were to do that, and his own party, members of his own party sought to oust him through the removal process, would you come to his rescue with votes?
Well, Billy, as I indicated, there's no circumstance where that is something that we should even be contemplating at this point in time, one way or the other, because what's in front of us at the moment is resolving this manufactured, reckless Republican shutdown crisis. And that's going to be our continued focus. How do we convince enough Republicans on the other side of the aisle to abandon their extremists, adhere to the agreement that they themselves negotiated, so we can meet the health, the safety, and the economic well-being needs of the American people? And as far as anything else, particularly as it relates to Republican political gamesmanship, we'll just have to cross that bridge if and when we get to it.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. In previous conferences, passing a rule used to be a formality. Can you speak to the American people who are new to this or just tuning in to this chaos? Can you speak of the unprecedented nature that at least 3 rules this Congress have been, Republicans have failed to pass 3 rules, and how unprecedented that is in the Congress?
And the House of Representatives, rules never go down. And as you've indicated, this is already a historically dysfunctional Congress in many other ways, but the failure of being able to even move bills to the floor for a substantive debate as a result of the Republican Civil War that is raging on the other side of the aisle is an example of the chaotic state of this do-nothing extreme Republican Congress. Last question, thanks.
Sir, do you have any response to the problem solvers framework that's out last night?
Haven't had an opportunity to fully evaluate the framework, but the fact that you've got individuals who are in conversation with each other about a bipartisan path forward is consistent with exactly what we as House Democrats continue to say. It's consistent with what Leader Schumer has continued to say, which is the only path forward to meet the needs of the American people, avoid an unnecessary shutdown, and continue to solve problems on behalf of everyday Americans is through bipartisan cooperation, communication, and common ground. In terms of the specifics of any proposals that may be put out into the public domain, including the one set forth as a framework, as I understand it, by the problem solvers, I can't really comment on it because I haven't evaluated the specifics. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr.